Welcome to Revenge Haven. The story we're about to hear today is one of betrayal, manipulation, and a daughter's fight to reclaim what was rightfully hers. This is Stella's story. The pen felt cold in my hand. I stared at the document in front of me, then at my father's expectant face across the mahogany table. "Sign it, Stella," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "Unless you want everyone to know what an ungrateful daughter you really are." I looked down at the papers. Transfer of property.
Quitclaim deed.
Waiver of inheritance rights. The words blurred together as my father's new wife, Linda, watched from the corner of the room, her arms crossed, her expression smug. This was supposed to be a simple estate signing, just paperwork to finalize what my grandmother had left me. Instead, it felt like an ambush. "Your grandmother would want us to stay together as a family," my father continued, leaning back in his chair. "This penthouse, the accounts, they should stay in the family. The real family." I signed. My hand shook, but I signed every document he pushed toward me. I gathered my purse, stood up from that table, and walked toward the door without looking back. The next day, my father's attorney, the real one, called him, and I heard the man was furious. "Do you have any idea what you just tried to do?" But let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Stella Corwin, and I'm 32 years old. And the man who tried to steal my inheritance? He's the same man who abandoned me and my dying mother 12 years ago. If you're already hooked by Stella's story of betrayal and justice, hit that subscribe button now because what happens next will shock you. This father's scheme goes deeper than you could imagine, and you won't want to miss how it all unravels. The conference room was smaller than I expected. Cold. Sterile. The kind of place where life-changing decisions were made behind closed doors, away from prying eyes. I'd arrived 10 minutes early, thinking I'd have time to collect myself, to prepare for what I assumed would be a straightforward estate transfer. My grandmother's will had been clear. Everything went to me. The penthouse. The investments. All of it. But when I walked in, my father was already there. Robert Corwin sat at the head of the table like he owned it, his suit perfectly pressed, his silver hair combed back in that way that made him look distinguished instead of the fraud he actually was. Linda stood behind him, one manicured hand resting on his shoulder, her smile tight and territorial. I hadn't seen either of them at the funeral, though I'd heard they'd been there, lingering in the back, playing the part of grieving son and daughter-in-law.
Stella.
My father stood, arms outstretched like we were old friends. "Thank you for coming." I didn't move toward him. "Where's Mr. Chen?" "The attorney? He's running late. Traffic, I think." My father gestured to the chair across from him. "But we can get started. It's just paperwork, really. Formalities." I sat down slowly, my purse clutched in my lap. Something felt wrong. The air was too thick, too expectant. Linda was watching me like a hawk circling prey. My father slid a stack of documents across the polished mahogany table. "Your grandmother was an incredible woman," he said, his voice taking on that rehearsed quality I remembered from my childhood. "She believed in family, in keeping things together, in making sure her legacy stayed where it belonged." I looked down at the papers. The first page was labeled Transfer of Property Rights. Beneath it, a quitclaim deed. Waiver of inheritance. Consolidation of estate assets. What is this? My voice came out smaller than I intended. "It's what your grandmother would have wanted," my father said smoothly. "The penthouse, the accounts, they should stay in the family, Stella. The real family. You're young. You'll build your own life. But this..." He tapped the documents. "This is generational wealth. It needs to be protected, managed properly." Linda leaned forward. "We have children to think about, Stella. Your brothers and sister. They deserve security too." My brothers and sister. The children my father had with the woman he left us for. The family he chose over my mother. Over me. "Sign it," my father said, his tone shifting. The warmth drained from his voice like water through a sieve. Unless you want everyone to know what an ungrateful daughter you really are. How you'd steal from your own family. How you'd dishonor your grandmother's memory just to be selfish. The pen felt impossibly heavy in my hand. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. Somewhere in the back of my mind, alarm bells were screaming. But louder than that was my father's voice, the same voice that had called me worthless when I was 16. The same voice that told my dying mother she wasn't enough. I pressed the pen to paper, hating myself for every second of hesitation. I was 20 years old when my mother died. 20 years old and sitting in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and defeat, watching the woman who raised me fade into something I barely recognized. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. 6 months of watching her body betray her while she smiled and told me everything would be okay. My father had been absent for most of it. Business trips, he said. Important meetings. Can't reschedule. I'd stopped expecting him to show up by month 3. Stopped saving him a chair beside her bed. Stopped lying to my mother about where he was. But he came that last day. I remember because I'd been holding my mother's hand, feeling how thin her fingers had become, how the bones pressed against her papery skin. The door opened and there he was, not in the wrinkled clothes of someone who'd rushed from work, but in a fresh suit. Hair perfectly styled. He looked like he was heading to a business lunch, not saying goodbye to his dying wife. Robert. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Even saying his name seemed to cost her something. He didn't sit down. Didn't take her other hand. He stood at the foot of the bed, checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. I can't do this anymore, he said.
No preamble. No softness.
Just 5 words that shattered what was left of our family. I have a real family now. A wife who doesn't drain me. A baby on the way. I need to focus on them. My mother closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. You're leaving? I heard myself say. Now? She's dying. She's been dying for 6 months, Stella. I've put my life on hold long enough. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Disgust. You're 20 years old. You'll figure it out. I can't be responsible for both of you anymore. He walked out. Didn't kiss my mother goodbye.
Didn't hug me.
Just turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor while machines beeped their steady rhythm around us. My mother died 3 days later. My grandmother arrived the next morning. I'd met her only a handful of times growing up. My father had always made excuses about why we couldn't visit, why she couldn't come to us. Too busy. Too far. Too complicated. But when she walked into that hospital room and saw my mother's empty bed, saw me sitting there with nowhere to go and no one to call, she didn't hesitate. Pack your things, she said, her voice steady and sure. You're coming home with me. She put me through college. Helped me find my first apartment. Taught me that family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up when everything fell apart. She never once mentioned my father, never made excuses for him. She just loved me in all the ways he never could. And when she got sick last year, I was there. Every doctor's appointment. Every treatment. Every terrifying scan result. I held her hand the same way I'd held my mother's, except this time, I wasn't alone in that room. This time, someone had stayed. My grandmother bought the Penthouse when I graduated from business school. I didn't know about it until she handed me the keys on my 26th birthday, her hands shaking slightly from the early stages of the Parkinson's that would eventually take her from me. For my Stella, who never gave up, she'd said, pressing the keys into my palm. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. It was a corner unit on the 18th floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows and hardwood floors that caught the morning light just right. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with marble countertops that I'd never dreamed of having. But it wasn't the luxury that made me cry when she first showed it to me. It was the framed photo she'd already hung in the living room, me and my mother at my high school graduation, both of us laughing at something I could no longer remember. "This is your foundation," my grandmother had told me. "No one can take this from you. Not a husband. Not a bad investment. Not anyone. This is yours." The penthouse was worth $2.5 million now, maybe more with how the market had exploded. But my grandmother had been strategic about more than just real estate. She'd set up investment accounts in my name, moved money into trusts, built a financial safety net that would have made my business professors weep with envy. $800,000 in liquid assets. Another $500,000 in stocks and bonds. A retirement account that was already substantial enough to let me breathe easier about my future. She'd planned it all. Every detail. Every transfer. She'd met with attorneys and financial advisors, made sure everything was airtight, made sure that when she was gone, I'd be taken care of in ways my father never had. The will reading had been brief. Mr. Chun, her attorney of 40 years, had laid it all out in simple terms. Everything went to me. The penthouse, the accounts, her jewelry, her furniture, even her car, a pristine Mercedes she'd barely driven in the last 2 years. My father wasn't mentioned once in the documents. She'd made her choice clear. But it was the letter that I couldn't bring myself to open. Mr. Chin had given it to me in a cream-colored envelope, my name written in my grandmother's shaky handwriting across the front. It had been tucked inside the deed to the penthouse, sealed with red wax like something from another era. "She wrote this 6 months ago," Mr. Chun had said gently. "She wanted you to have it when you were ready." I'd carried it with me every day since the funeral, tucked in my purse like a talisman. I knew what it would say. I knew it would be full of love and wisdom and all the things my grandmother had always told me about being strong and worthy and deserving of good things. But reading it would make her death real, in a way I wasn't ready to face. The letter represented everything my father had never given me. Validation, unconditional love, the belief that I mattered. And he wanted to take that too. The call came 3 days after the funeral. I was sitting in my grandmother's penthouse, my penthouse now, though it still didn't feel real, sorting through her things and trying not to break down every time I touched something that smelled like her perfume. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer.
Stella.
My father's voice hit me like a physical blow. "It's Dad. Dad." Like he'd earned that title. Like he hadn't abandoned me 12 years ago and never looked back. "How did you get this number?" "I've been trying to reach you. About your grandmother." His voice was soft, careful, like he was talking to a skittish animal. "I wanted to come to the funeral, but I didn't want to intrude. I know things have been complicated between us." Complicated. That was one word for it. "I thought we could meet," he continued when I didn't respond.
Talk.
"There are things we need to discuss. Estate matters. Your grandmother's wishes." Mr. Chen already handled the will reading. I know, he sighed, and I could picture him running his hand through his silver hair, that gesture he always used when he wanted to appear thoughtful. "But there's more to it than just legal documents, Stella. There's family.
History.
Your grandmother, she was my mother. I think she'd want us to reconcile, to honor her memory by coming together." I should have hung up. Should have blocked his number and never looked back. But that old, desperate part of me, the 20-year-old girl he'd abandoned in a hospital room, wanted to believe him. We met for coffee 2 days later. He'd chosen the place, some upscale cafe in the financial district where everything cost twice what it should and people spoke in hushed tones about mergers and acquisitions. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. "I ordered for you," he said, standing to hug me. I let him, my body stiff and unresponsive. "Vanilla latte, right? That's what you used to drink." I'd switched to black coffee in college.
He wouldn't know that.
He talked for an hour. About his regrets. His mistakes. How he'd been young and stupid and scared when my mother got sick. How leaving was the biggest mistake of his life. How he thought about me every day, but didn't know how to reach out, didn't know if I'd even want to hear from him. Your grandmother, he said, his eyes getting misty in a way that looked almost genuine. She never forgave me. But she loved you so much, Stella. She'd want us to be family again. To stay together. That's what family does, right? They forgive. He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was warm and dry and felt nothing like the hands that used to tuck me in at night before everything fell apart. I know I don't deserve it, he said, but I want another chance. Let me be your father again. I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. If you've ever wanted to believe someone who hurt you could change, you understand exactly what Stella's feeling right now. Drop a comment below if you've experienced something similar. This community is here for you. And subscribe to Revenge Haven for more stories of survival and strength. The red flags started small. Easy to dismiss. Easy to explain away when I was so desperate to believe my father had actually changed. First, it was his insistence on attending the follow-up meeting with Mr. Chen. I want to support you, he'd said over the phone. Estate matters can be overwhelming. You shouldn't have to handle this alone. I'd agreed, grateful for what I thought was genuine concern. But when we arrived at Mr. Chen's office, my father spent the entire meeting asking questions that had nothing to do with supporting me. What's the current market value of the penthouse? He'd asked, leaning forward in his chair. Has it been recently appraised? The investment accounts, are they liquid? Can they be easily transferred, or do they require a waiting period? And the trust structures. Who has access? Who can make changes? Mr. Chen had answered each question with increasing caution, his eyes flicking to me like he was trying to gauge whether I understood what was happening. I didn't.
Not yet.
Then Linda started showing up. My father's wife. The woman he'd left us for. She appeared at the second meeting, uninvited, her designer handbag matching her shoes in that way that screamed old money, even though I knew she came from nothing. I hope you don't mind, my father had said, his hand on Linda's back. Linda wanted to pay her respects. She never got to properly say goodbye to my mother. Linda had smiled at me, all white teeth and cold eyes. Robert's told me so much about what his mother left behind. It's quite substantial, isn't it? You must feel so fortunate. What his mother left behind. Not what my grandmother left to me. Like it was some unclaimed prize we were all entitled to. The questions continued. My father started calling me every few days, always casual, always friendly, but always circling back to the same topics. Have you thought about what you'll do with all that space? The penthouse is awfully big for one person. Those investment accounts, you're being smart about taxes, right? Sometimes it's better to consolidate things. Keep them in the family. I was talking to a financial advisor friend of mine. He said estates like this, they can be complicated. You might want to consider putting everything in a family trust. For protection. When I mentioned I was meeting with my own financial advisor, his tone shifted. You don't need to pay someone for advice, Stella. I can help you with all of this. That's what fathers do. The final red flag came when Linda called me directly. I was at work, in the middle of reviewing a contract, when her number popped up on my screen. Stella, darling, she'd said, her voice syrupy sweet. I was wondering if you'd given any thought to Robert's suggestion about consolidating the estate. It would make things so much simpler. And really, with everything your grandmother built, it should stay in the family. All of us. Together. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about family. This was about money. It had always been about money. The email came from my father, not Mr. Chen. That should have been my first clue. Final estate signing scheduled for Thursday, 2 p.m. Chen's office. Just some paperwork to finalize everything. Should only take an hour. See you there. I'd called Mr. Chen's office to confirm, but his secretary said he was in court all morning and would meet us at the office. Something about a case running long. It all seemed plausible enough. Lawyers got held up in court. These things happened. But when I walked into that conference room on Thursday afternoon, my father was already seated at the head of the table, like he'd been there for hours. Linda stood behind him, and spread across the mahogany surface were stacks of documents I'd never seen before. Neat piles. Color-coded tabs. The kind of preparation that took days, not hours.
Stella.
My father stood, checking his watch. Right on time. Chin called, he's stuck in traffic. Bad accident on the bridge. But he said we could get started without him. It's just formalities anyway. I stayed in the doorway, my hand still on the handle. We should wait for him. Sweetheart, we're all busy people. Linda's voice was tight with impatience. Your father took the afternoon off work for this. We have dinner reservations at 6. This is just signing papers. Nothing complicated. My father gestured to the chair across from him. Come on.
Sit.
Let me explain what we're looking at here. I moved into the room slowly, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But I sat down. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me still wanted to believe this was legitimate. Maybe because I was raised to be polite, to not make scenes, to trust authority figures even when they'd never earned it. The documents were already arranged in front of my chair. Transfer of property rights on top. Beneath it, forms with titles I'd never heard of. Consolidation of estate assets.
Quitclaim deed.
Waiver of inheritance claims. Family trust establishment agreement. What is all this? My voice sounded small in the large room. Protection, my father said smoothly. He'd rehearsed this. I could tell by the way the words came out, practiced and confident. Your grandmother built something incredible, Stella. But wealth like this, it needs proper management. Structure. These documents move everything into a family trust. That way it's protected from taxes, from lawsuits, from any future complications. A family trust, I repeated. With your father as trustee, Linda added, leaning forward. He has the experience to manage assets like these. And really, it's what your grandmother would have wanted. Keeping everything in the family. There was that phrase again. The family. Like I wasn't sitting right there. Like I wasn't her granddaughter, the one she'd actually raised and loved and provided for. My father slid a pen across the table.
Mont Blanc.
Expensive. The kind of pen that made signatures feel important and binding. Just a formality, sweetheart, he said. Then we can all move forward. Together. I had the pen in my hand. The tip was hovering over the signature line of the first document. My father was leaning back in his chair with that satisfied smile, the one that said he'd already won. Linda was checking her phone, probably confirming those dinner reservations. The door burst open. Mr. Harrison Chin stood in the doorway, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled, his face flushed like he'd been running. He was 73 years old and looked like he'd just sprinted up 5 flights of stairs. Stop. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Stella, do not sign anything. My hand froze. Chun. My father's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. We were just getting started. Traffic cleared up. There was no traffic. Mr. Chin walked into the room, his eyes locked on the documents spread across the table. There was no accident on the bridge. My secretary received a call this morning from someone claiming to be my assistant, telling her to inform Ms. Corwin that I'd be delayed and to proceed without me. He looked at my father. I don't have an assistant, Robert. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mr. Chin reached across the table and pulled the documents toward him. His hands moved quickly, flipping through pages, his expression growing darker with each one. Transfer of property rights.
Quitclaim date.
Waiver of inheritance. He looked up at my father. Where did you get these? I had my attorney draft them, my father said, his voice still calm, but with an edge now. For protection. Estate planning. Surely you understand. These documents are fraudulent. Mr. Chen's voice was quiet but absolute. They misrepresent the terms of Mrs. Corwin's will. They attempt to transfer assets that were explicitly and irrevocably left to Stella alone. They would strip her of property rights she legally owns. He set the papers down carefully, like they were contaminated. If Stella had signed these, you would have committed wire fraud, forgery, and attempted theft of assets exceeding $1 million. Linda's face had gone white. Robert. I was trying to help, my father said, but the smoothness was gone from his voice now. To protect the family assets. My mother would have wanted. Your mother, Mr. Chin interrupted, spent the last 40 years of her life as my client. I knew her better than almost anyone. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that she wanted every single asset to go to Stella. Not to you.
Not your new family.
To the granddaughter who stayed by her side. He turned to me, his expression softening. I have the real documents in my briefcase. The actual estate transfer papers. They require only your signature, Stella. No one else's. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm her father. I have rights. You have no rights to this estate, Mr. Chin said flatly. You were deliberately excluded from your mother's will. She made that choice consciously and legally. I watched my father's mask finally crack. The caring parent disappeared, replaced by something cold and furious. You ungrateful little. My father didn't finish the sentence. Mr. Chen's expression made it clear that anything else he said would only make things worse for him. But the damage was done. The mask had slipped, and we'd all seen what was underneath. I think we're finished here, Mr. Chen said, gathering the fraudulent documents into a neat stack. I'll be keeping these as evidence. Stella, if you'd like to press charges. Wait. Linda's voice was shrill, panicked. She was staring at my father like she'd never seen him before. Robert, what is he talking about? You said this was about protecting family assets. You said we were doing this together. For the kids. My father's jaw tightened. Linda, not now. For the kids. She stood up, her designer handbag falling to the floor. That's what you told me. That your mother left everything to Stella, but it should be split fairly. Among all of us. The whole family. Her voice was rising with each word. You said we needed to convince her to do the right thing. I was handling it, my father snapped. Handling it. Linda snatched one of the documents from Mr. Chen's stack. Her eyes scanned the page, and I watched her face transform from confusion to horror. This doesn't say anything about the kids. This doesn't say anything about me.
Robert Corwin, sole trustee.
Robert Corwin, primary beneficiary. She looked up at him. You were going to take everything for yourself. The silence in that room was deafening. That's not. My father started, but Linda cut him off. How stupid do you think I am? Her voice cracked. I gave up my career for you. I raised your children. I stood by you when your own mother wouldn't even speak to you. And this whole time, you were planning to steal from your daughter and cut me out too. It's more complicated than that, my father said, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. Linda grabbed her bag from the floor. We're done. The lawyers will contact you about the divorce. She walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed through the room. My father stood there, his perfect silver hair slightly disheveled now, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. This is your fault, he said, pointing at me. You turned her against me. You and my mother, always trying to ruin everything I build. I didn't have to turn anyone against you, I said quietly. You did that yourself. I found out later, through mutual acquaintances, how thoroughly his life unraveled. Linda filed for divorce within a week and told her children, his stepchildren, everything. They'd already suspected something was off about their suddenly attentive stepfather, but learning he'd referred to me as the mistake in text messages to Linda, that he'd planned to steal my inheritance while pretending it was for their benefit, that was the final straw. His stepdaughter posted about it on social media. Nothing explicit, just enough to let their social circle know what kind of man Robert Corwin really was. The whispers spread through his networking groups, his country club, his carefully curated professional circles. The perfect family he'd abandoned us for imploded in less than a month. And he had no one to blame but himself. Robert's world just collapsed, but Stella's story isn't over yet. What her grandmother left in that sealed letter will bring everything full circle. If you've been on this journey with us, subscribe now because Revenge Haven brings you these powerful endings every single time. The penthouse was quiet when I got home that evening. The kind of quiet that used to make me uncomfortable, that made me turn on the television just for background noise. But tonight, I let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I poured myself a glass of wine, expensive red from my grandmother's collection that I'd been too intimidated to open, and sat on the couch facing those floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out before me, lights flickering on as the sun set behind the buildings. 18 floors up, and I could see everything. The letter was still in my purse. I'd carried it for 3 months now, through the funeral and the will reading and my father's manipulation and today's confrontation. The cream-colored envelope was soft at the edges from being handled, my name across the front in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. I pulled it out, broke the red wax seal. My hands were steadier than I expected. The letter was written on her personal stationery, the kind with her monogram embossed at the top. Her handwriting wandered across the page, some words clear and strong, others trailing off where her hand had trembled. "My dearest Stella," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope I told you enough times while I was alive how proud I am of you.
How much you mean to me.
How watching you grow into the woman you are has been the greatest joy of my life." My vision blurred. I blinked hard, forcing myself to keep reading. "Your father will come back. I know this as certainly as I know my own name. He'll come with apologies and manipulation and all the tactics that worked on your mother. But you are not your mother, my darling girl. You are stronger. You are smarter. And you deserve so much more than his conditional love." I had to stop, set the letter down, take a breath that hurt my chest. The penthouse, the money, all of it, these are not gifts. They're tools. Security. Freedom. The foundation you need to build whatever life you choose, without needing anyone's permission or approval. But more than that, they're proof. Proof that you were loved unconditionally. Proof that you mattered. Proof that someone saw you for exactly who you are and thought you were extraordinary. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I cried for my grandmother. For my mother. For the 20-year-old girl I'd been in that hospital room, abandoned and terrified. For all the years I'd spent trying to be good enough, trying to earn love that should have been freely given. "You never needed to earn my love," the letter continued, like my grandmother could read my thoughts even now. "You had it from the moment you were born. Nothing you could do would ever change that. I only hope I showed you what real love looks like. The kind that stays. The kind that shows up. The kind that protects you even after I'm gone." The letter ended with a line that broke me and healed me at the same time. "You were always worthy, Stella. The inheritance is just proof of what you already had. My whole heart." I sat there as the sun disappeared completely and the city lights took over, holding my grandmother's words and finally understanding. The penthouse wasn't just a place to live. The money wasn't just financial security. They were her way of making sure I never forgot what she'd spent 12 years teaching me. That I was loved. That I mattered. That I deserved to take up space in this world. My father couldn't take that from me. No one could.